Good afternoon, everyone.
Mr. P, how we doing?
Good, sir. How you doing?
Oh, we hanging in there, hanging in there. We got a few others leaving another meeting, so we'll get started a little while. Good evening, everyone. It's 5 o'clock, so let me go ahead on and call our special call meeting for April 6th to order. Ms. Only, can you call the roll for attendance?
Yes, sir. Malinowski.
Here for now.
Pugh.
Here.
McBride.
Here.
Livingston.
Here.
Horatio. Joe Walker. Barron.
Here.
Overture Walker. Mackey.
Here.
English. Newton.
Thank you very much.
We have a four.
Let me again just state the purpose of this meeting. This is a meeting that was recommended by the Economic Development Committee that's chaired by Ms. McBride. And the whole idea is to make sure that all council members are privy to a comprehensive review of the Economic Development Strategic Plan. Of course, this is an essential part of what we do as county council members and what help us to function as council. So what I would do is I would go ahead on and ask for the adoption of the agenda. And then I'll turn it over to Mrs. McBride, who chairs the Economic Development Committee, to tell us why we're here in more detail. I'll entertain a motion for the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move for the adoption of the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Anything else to be added, deleted from the agenda? There being none, Mrs. Thorne, can you call the roll for the adoption of the agenda?
Malinowski.
Yes.
Pugh.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Horatio.
Yes.
Joe Walker. Barron.
Yes.
Overture Walker. Mackey.
Yes.
English. And Newton. Motion passes.
Now that brings us to open remarks. I'm going to call on Ms. McBride, Chairperson of our Economic Development Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for first of all, for your approval of the special call meeting and for allowing me to provide a few prepared remarks. First, I want to recognize Mr. Rubel and his staff for the awesome job that they do in pursuing opportunities for economic development in Richland County. And I also would like to, at this time, acknowledge our council members on the Economic Development Committee, Mr. Overture Walker and Mr. Joe Walker, and also to acknowledge the work of the late Councilman Chip Jackson that he did on this strategic plan. Today's presentation from Chip's strategic strategies is the result of the combination of a year-long effort by Tip and our staff. It required a lot of coordination, dedication, research, and collaboration. And much has happened over the last past year, and a lot has been forgotten, particularly if you like me, because I have been consumed with COVID-19. So I thought it would be good to at least provide a little background information on how the plan was evolved. And thank you, Mr. Rubel, for helping me with this background information. First, the strategic plan was initiated in response to a request from County Council for a fresh, new comprehensive strategy for economic development in Richland County. So the request came from County Council. And of course, we have new members, so they were not a part of that request. Secondly, Chip Strategies was selected to develop the plan, and Chip was the highest respondent, received the highest grade, and therefore, score rather, and therefore they were selected for the plan. And it was done in our procurement office, the RFP was issued in February 2020. So over the course of about 8 months, Chip conducted numerous interviews with staff, administration, and community stakeholders to just gauge the priorities regarding economic development. So on December the 20th, on December the 15th, 2020, a draft of the plan was presented to the Economic Development Committee. And so today, the full strategic plan will be presented to full council. I personally believe that this plan can help provide the opportunity to open many doors for economic development. And I think the plan provides opportunities to be more inclusive, reaching all of our districts. So I am really excited to be a part of this planning process. And lastly, I want to thank and welcome Mr. Stillman, who is the founder and principals of Tip Strategies, and Mr. Alex Cook, who led the project with Richland County. So, Mr. Chair, this completes my opening remarks, but I wait eagerly to hear the plan with council and also to hear their perspectives. So at this time, Mr. Rubel, I'm going to ask you to introduce the presenters for the presentation. If there's additional information you would like to add also, please do.
Thank you, Ms. McBride.
Thank you, Ms. McBride. I think Alex Cook and Tom Stillman are on the screen with us. Alex, I think, is going to share his screen. Alex, can you do that and we'll launch in? Great, thank you. Before Alex and Tom take it away, I was just going to do a couple quick slides just to kind of get you up to speed on our office. So just through the years, I guess every community does economic development different ways. In Columbia, for years, we did it through an industrial development board pretty much through the 60s and 70s. That industrial development board was a partnership between Lexington and Richland counties and the city of Columbia. And they focused just on industry, just recruiting manufacturing plants. And they had a lot of success. They recruited Michelin over to Lexington, International Paper, a lot of companies that have come and gone, but good companies, Pirelli, Cooper Tools, just a lot of great success. One of the hallmarks was NCR and their location. In the mid 80s, through politics, basically, they just did away with that industrial development board, and they brought economic development into the Greater Columbia Chamber of Commerce. That lasted about 5, 6, 7 years. And I think I can say this with 2020 now, it was a dismal failure. It just did not work at the chamber. There was money diverted. Finally, the whole economic development effort was watered down. Finally, the head of the development board at the time, which is now the Department of Commerce, came to met with the mayor and said, you're just not getting it done. You're not competitive. You need to change things. So they created the Central Carolina Economic Development Alliance. At first, it was a 4-county group of Richland, Lexington, Fairfield, and Newberry counties. And they handled economic development for Richland County. And that lasted for 15 years or so. In 2009, county council members started noticing that they weren't achieving kind of like they wanted to. So they did a strategic plan, and they went out and they said, do we need to create an economic development office? And the answer was absolutely. You're the last county of your size, and either Carolinas, Georgia, or Tennessee that we know of that doesn't have an office. So in 2011, we created our office. Alex, you can go to the next slide. So our office is less than 10 years old. It is a 4-person staff, so relatively lean and mean. If you look at Charleston or Greenville, their staffs are at least twice our size. Next slide, please. But I will say that I think Richland County's, the council's decision to create that office has paid off. So since 2006, we've enjoyed 3 of the 5 best years ever in capital investment. And that's a good barometer. Jobs is also a good one, but jobs tend to come and go. But capital investment is a pretty good barometer of how we do things. Next slide. And then the big one, of course, was Mark Anthony Brewing. That was the deal of the year last year in the state. And we had a number of other huge successes. The technology action plan was a major undertaking. As Ms. McBride noted, this strategic plan took some time, but really that capital investment is almost twice as large as anything we've had in the past. So it was a banner year for 2020. So that's just a quick update. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom and Alex and let them take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Tom Stellman. I'm the CEO and founder of TIP Strategies, and we're fortunate to get to work in Richland County this last year, especially in a time with COVID. We as a firm were a little concerned that not everybody would want to go forward. And so when Jeff and Tiffany called to say that we were hired to do the work, we were very excited and have been very pleased with our ability to engage with the stakeholders there virtually. Alex and I have both been out there before, and so have done work in the region before. And so we had a pretty good feel for much of it, but we really appreciate your patience as the stakeholders as we went through a virtual process. Alex is our senior VP on the consulting within the firm and actually has been with us for over 20 years and had just completed work for Charleston recently. And so had been working in the state, had a pretty good idea of the competitive environment. So Alex is going to do the bulk of this presentation today, but I did want to give you just a little background on the firm so you guys, for those of you who are new, who don't know us, have a little feel for what that is. TIP stands for Theory into Practice. And so our approach to helping communities in economic development comes from a practitioner's perspective. Me and my partners and Alex have all led economic development divisions and departments with other groups in the past. And we try not to just produce a report, but to actually produce a plan that is implementable. We have been fortunate to work in most states across the country. Right now we have projects from Idaho. We're doing work just north of Denver, all up and down the Atlantic seaboard, the mid-Atlantic area, and other places across the country. Some examples of our projects. Alex, I think we've got a a sheet here in a minute. I'll tell you just about a couple of quick projects, but I am the CEO and founder. We brought Tracy McDaniel into our firm 2 years ago as our president, and Tracy was formerly the head of the Greater Houston Partnership Economic Development Division, as well as the state of Texas and the state of New Jersey in the past. And my partners, John and Jeff, have also led economic development organizations in the states of Washington and Oregon. And Jeff was most recently the CEO of the Seattle Economic Development Group. So, and Alex, as I mentioned, the second project on there, Alex just led a project for Charleston County and is currently leading a project just finishing up a project for Delaware. And then we were fortunate recently to be hired by Greenville, South Carolina. So we are doing quite a bit of work in the region. One of the other project that I'll point out is we just finished a large project for Harris County, which is the home of Houston, Texas, where we helped them set up an economic mobility department, which was specific to look at diversity, equity, and inclusion for that county, kind of on top of their economic development program, to actually look at, how is the county purchasing, how is the county developing and incentivizing groups to support populations within their county that typically are not addressed through traditional economic development. So I didn't mean for this to be a commercial. I just wanted to give you guys an idea of, who we were, and so you kind of understand our perspective. So Alex, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon. Thanks for your support and your participation in this planning process. I think it was very successful, and we're very pleased with the product. Just a little bit about the planning process itself. It was three main contributors to a quantitative analysis. It included things like demographics and regional network analysis and connectivity contributed to the document, as well as stakeholder input. We did a number of phone interviews with over 20 stakeholders in the county. We also did a national site selection survey to gauge some perception perception of Licking County, both within the region and outside the state. And I think that was very informative, and I'll share an example of what we learned from that. And then also doing best practices, looking at other economic development organizations, other peers and competitors to Licking County, and then looking at how communities have used military installations to feed their talent pipeline in the community, and I provided an example of that as well later on. So one of the things that came up that caught our eye as we were doing some of the economic analysis was looking at the components of population change in the county over basically the last 18 years. And so what this shows you is the light blue bar, it shows net immigration. So that's net international migration into the county. The medium tone blue, it shows net domestic migration. So that's showing people moving into and out of the county from other places within the United States. And the dark blue, the dark green, I guess, color shows the natural increase. So that's births over deaths in the county. And what caught our eye is, as you can see, really since the since the Great Recession, if you will, there's been sort of a downtick in sort of net increase in population in the county. The population has been increasing, but it's been slowing. And if you look at 2019, the year before, the year before last year, during COVID, there was actually a slight decrease in net domestic migration. So more people were leaving the county to other places in the country than they were moving into the county. So that caught our eye, and something that gave us some thought as we were putting together some of the strategies. I mentioned the site selection survey that we did. Some of the key findings that really the region lacks a similar brand to your competitors such as Charleston and Greenville. And I think, part of that is, we ask about Columbia or we ask about Licking County, and a lot of many of the site location consultants and commercial brokers, especially outside of the state, didn't have a strong feeling for Richland County. And that, unlike Charleston and Greenville, those counties, those areas have a stronger tie to the city. And so that was a finding that maybe a stronger regional alignment around marketing and branding toward Columbia could improve that situation. The availability of sites and real estate was also often mentioned as an issue that the county should always be on top of, and making sure that you have adequate industrial and commercial land to be able to accommodate new investment. And then workforce availability, skills, critical mass within target industries were cited as barriers to successful recruitment. But that doesn't, you're not alone in that. In most places we work, the issue of talent and workforce availability is a critical issue that most every community is struggling with. We did the SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I won't go through all of these bullets. You'll have, if you haven't had a chance, please go and look at the document, and you can look at most of these bullets. I'll just touch on a couple in each of the categories. A great strength of yours is the quality higher education institutions that you have. Higher education is not just a quality of life asset, it's really an economic engine. And it drives both new investment, it drives innovation, and it drives talent. So that's one of your key strengths. And then your 2,300 acres of county-owned and controlled industrial properties. I know that Jeff and his team have really worked to increase the supply of available industrial land, and I think that's really paid off in recent years in some of your investments. In terms of weaknesses, I mentioned that lack of a strong economic development brand in the image of the county and region. I think that's something that needs to be improved, and something that we thought about it within the strategies and addressed within one of the main goals. The attraction and retention of skilled professionals and knowledge workers, especially IT workers, is an issue. You graduate a lot of very smart, talented people at your universities and your colleges in the region, but I think much more needs to be done to be able to retain those folks, and that's impacted by quality of life, but also economic opportunity. In terms of some of the opportunities that I wanted to highlight, business development and marketing, we really feel like the department can be doing more to generate additional investment leads, not just relying on regional partners in the state, but given some additional capacity. I think Jeff and Tiffany and the team could have the ability to really attract more investment. Greater engagement on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. When I say engagement, I think the department has a very narrow mission in terms of attracting jobs and investment and retaining businesses and investment. But what we're seeing around the country that were amplified and accelerated the events of last year, both COVID and the social justice movement, is economic development organizations around the country are really having to come to grips with how they are ensuring that all geographic areas and all populations in a county are benefiting from their programs and their efforts. And this is not to say that the department is going to be able to solve all these issues, but being able to engage with other organizations in a more intentional effort to look at these issues, and also other departments within the county, I think is an opportunity. And I'll touch on some of the other recommendations we had around this issue a little bit later on. Long-term economic threats, long-term economic disruption caused by COVID. I mean, this is a global threat. We're just now starting to see some of the effects in terms of how COVID is affecting investment trends and supply chains and all of those things in terms of how people work and how people engage each other. So this is something that you all are going to have to understand and track very closely. And then falling behind other key competitive metros for new investment and talent. One of the things that we heard in our stakeholder interviews is and I think it's more maybe a perception that we're not keeping up with Charleston, we're not keeping up with Greenville, we're not keeping up with some of our other competitors in the region, and we need to be doing more. So I'm going to touch on the framework for the plan. And so this is the vision statement we drafted along with in collaboration with the staff that Richland County will build on its strong economic base and considerable assets to emerge as a global center for innovative businesses, technologies, and people. And we really feel that the vision statement should say something. They should be bold. They shouldn't just be about being, we're going to be a great place to live, work, and play. So we really feel like Richland County and the Columbia region need to raise the profile, become a global center for those investments, those businesses, those technologies and people. The mission of the organization, this is what it's actually intended to do, is to advance the county's competitiveness by building a dynamic, diverse economy. So diverse economy and increasing prosperity for all residents. And again, this goes to that overarching mission of making sure that everybody in the county is benefiting from the resources that the county allocates toward economic development. So here are the 4 goals of the plan, and I won't read all the sentences, but we organize the plan around really 3 main goals, three core competencies of the organization, and then some other strategic areas of influence that we feel like the organization, the department rather, can have an influencing factor on. So global business development, existing business retention, expansion, and then communications and marketing. So a couple of the key strategies under global business development: building relationships with real estate brokers and site selectors. One of the impacts of COVID on the economic development practice is many organizations, their business development outreach, their marketing outreach was predicated upon going to industry trade shows and conferences and things like that to meet decision makers in industries and people that were making decisions about where they're going to invest. Well, COVID put a halt to that last year, and I think that was an accelerating trend that more EDOs were not getting as much out of those activities as they did in the past. And so I really think expanding the outreach to those real estate brokers, the site selectors, is going to be key to generating more awareness of Richland County and also about generating new investment leads. Another thing I want to talk about is another way to develop those investment leads is through your BRE program. So having a more intentional program where you're meeting with those key businesses, and you're also finding out about what are their supply chain networks look like. Well, who are their vendors? Would they benefit by having other companies that were located close to them? So using that intelligence to generate new investment leads, I think, is an opportunity. Business retention and expansion is really the core of any good economic development program, making sure that your existing businesses are successful and well taken care of, and their needs are being addressed. So one of the things that we talked about doing is raising the profile of the county's BRE program to make sure that regional businesses are more aware of it and what they're intended to do, and maybe more willing to engage with the staff on BRE. And then again, bolstering the business visitation program to build relationships with key employers. Already doing a good job, but with any program, I think more can be done, and more intent and resources can be allocated toward that. Communications and marketing. Be more aggressive in telling success stories that resulted from your efforts. I think this is something that in many places we work, that people say we don't do a good job of telling success stories. And when I asked that question to stakeholders that we visited with, many thought that, and it's not just your BRE, but the success you had in 2020. Be more aggressive in telling those success stories, making sure that you as elected officials, that the community as a whole, and then external stakeholders, external audiences are aware of what's going on. What are the great things that are happening in Richland County, and how they can participate in those successes. So some of the strategic areas of influence, I mentioned equitable and inclusive growth. We provided some recommendations about how the department can do additional outreach to historically utilized businesses, more minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. But again, they're not going to be able to solve this on their own. But one of the things that we talked about was highlighting businesses owned by women and people of color in marketing materials, making sure that the success stories that they're seeing are highlighted, so other people that are other potential opportunities entrepreneurs can see those successful businesses and those and making sure that they feel like they can participate in that. Well, they can be successful, and maybe they'll reach out to the department and see how they can be assisted. In terms of workforce, connecting military personnel separating from service in the region with local employers. This is something that Tom and I were first started working on about 15 years ago with a community in Texas outside of Fort Hood. We created what's called a veterans inventory, which was really a survey that the communities got together and at Fort Hood, Texas, as soldiers were transitioning out of service, they were able to get that survey to those soldiers, and they were able to use that information to kind of better tailor some of the workforce development training programs in the region. They were able to kind of better invest in some of the amenities and educational assets that those soldiers and their spouses were looking for, and also better communicate that information in terms of their skill sets, their career interests, what they wanted to do in the civilian workforce. They were able to use that information and market it to potential employers that were interested in the region and wanted to know more about the talent pipeline. So that was a successful program, and we provided a case study for Jeff and his team, and I think he's already had some conversations about that with some of the other stakeholders in the region, partner organizations. Entrepreneurship and innovation. This is an issue that economic development organizations around the country are kind of wanting to get more involved in. It's not just about attracting new businesses, but how can we support the new startups in a community, and the risk-taking folks that want to start and perhaps might fail, but might be very successful, and even those businesses that have already started, how can you help them scale up? And again, telling those entrepreneurial success stories, making sure that people in the community of all walks of life are knowledgeable about local businesses that have started up, have been successful and have grown is really critical to improving that entrepreneurial culture, which is essential to this area. And then community development and placemaking, highlighting those Richland County's quality of place assets within the business development marketing materials. Increasingly that businesses, when they send out an RFP or an RFI to communities, they want to know more about what kind of assets, what kind of amenities do you have that not only will help me attract workers that want to move there, but help me retain my workers. So it's really important that those site location consultants and those businesses are aware of all the great things that are in Richland County, that why people live there and why they love the place. So we also had some recommendations around organizational considerations, that's both internal and how the organization is governed. And this is something that we've had some experience with in recent years. And before I get into the recommendations, I'll mention, for instance, when we did the work for Charleston County, we made some organizational recommendations. Yesterday, I did a presentation to the Dallas City Council about creating a new independent economic development organization outside of the city of Dallas that actually enjoyed a lot of support by the Dallas City Council. So, in thinking about how the Department of Economic Development could really, I think, be more effective in the future, we've made the recommendation that the county should establish a new independent public-private partnership to house RCDO. And this new entity would really serve as a true partnership to be able to bring together the resources and the commitment and the expertise of both the public and the private sectors. And the intent of this recommendation is not to privatize economic development. It's really to embrace the resources, to embrace the skill sets, the involvement, and the engagement of the private sector in economic development, and not be seen as just a public activity. And so why we feel it makes sense in Richland County to help it execute its mission is it allow the organization more speed and efficiency in responding to business development opportunities. One of the things we talk about is EDOs have to be able to move at the pace of the market. And so, we really feel like having some independence and autonomy outside of county government would provide the organization that ability. It'll allow RCDO greater access to private networks, industry knowledge, and resources, especially at the board level, having dynamic businesses that serve on a board. It's not just about any resources they can provide, but they have networks, they have knowledge about industry trends, they have contacts that can really make an economic development organization more effective. It would add potential to engage with the private sectors on such issues of workforce, housing, and equity. Again, that ability to engage on some of these issues with the private sector that Jeff and Tiffany and their team just don't really have the ability to do right now. And finally, allow more operational flexibility and autonomy on issues such as financial planning and budgeting and human resources and IT and purchasing and procurement. So those are the key reasons why we really feel like the county exploring the option of spinning out RCDO as the P3. But this is not about the county losing oversight of the entity. You know, we really feel like the county should, through board representation and appointments, the county would maintain oversight and control over the entity. A board of directors of 7 to 9 members. That was our first recommendation, not too big, not too small, representing both the public sector and the private sector. So perhaps maybe a member of the council or a couple members of the council can sit on the board, but we really want a strong representation by the private sector. And again, the director should propose a slate of private sector candidates for the council's consideration and approval. Transparency is incredibly important in this process. So the entity our EDO should provide quarterly reports and an annual report that should be submitted to county council. Recently, I had an interview with the CEO of Invest Atlanta to kind of find out about what makes that organization so successful as an independent organization outside the city of Atlanta. And she really harped on, you have to be transparent. You have to be constantly informing and educating both the elected officials and the broader community about what you're doing and how you're improving the economic vitality in the community. The authority to approve incentives will remain with Richland County Council, and the RCDO will be responsible for promoting, restructuring, and administrating county incentives just as it does now. Funding would largely remain the same in terms of business tax revenues flowing from the companies that the county is incentivized, would continue to be the primary source of revenue for the organization. Excuse me. But as a public-private partnership, you know, RCDO would also have the ability to receive additional financial support from the private sector. But what we're not talking about, this is not a pay-to-play funding model. This is not where the more you invest in an organization, you get a board seat. This is about really contributing to the success of the community, about businesses that are concerned about or engaged and concerned about economic vitality in Richland County, or investing in the organization to help it be more successful. And really just talking about a small percentage of total funding for the organization. And those funds would largely be used to dedicated to supporting specific ED initiatives and also some business development expenses. And so we're on the last two slides, last couple of slides, and then I'll turn it over to questions. So we also had some recommendations about the internal structure of the organization to make the team more effective. And this really was based on recommending 2 new positions into the organization. One, a project manager. So, you know, we had some discussions with Jeff, and so, you know, how do you spend so much of your time, and you know, how do you feel like the organization could be more effective if you were able to do some other things? And, you know, Jeff, I think he needs to spend more time on strategic issues and being more of a CEO of the organization. So much of his time right now is on the project management, which I know he loves to do. It's in the blood of every great economic developer, but I think the organization would benefit from having a new project manager to really sort of take away some of those day-to-day activities from Jeff and from Tiffany, to allow them to do some other things, to think more strategically, to engage on some of these issues that we talked about, and especially with the private sector. And then a marketing communications person. We had a number of recommendations around marketing communications to, again, raising awareness of the organization, raising awareness of the community and the county, both internally and externally, and adding that person to the team, I think, would make it a much more effective organization and allow it to implement the recommendations that we made. And I think Jeff has already has that in the works in terms of his internal structuring. So with that, that was a lot of information. I encourage you, if you hadn't had a chance, to please review the plan. But with that, I'll turn it over to any questions that you have.
Thank you very, very much for that presentation. And I'll open the floor for questions now. Ms. Rube, do you have anything to add before I get to questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. The one thing I was just going to mention is, as a huge expression of gratitude to Tom and Alex for their hard work. They've been delightful to work with. As you can see, they're the consummate professionals. The fact that they did Charleston counties and now they're working on Greenville County's strategic plans gives us a lot of confidence that they hit the mark here in Richland County. So that's the only thing I was going to add, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Let me now open the floor for my colleagues. Ms. Mackey?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This was a good presentation. I appreciate you sharing, and I think you pulled out some really good points and key initiatives for us to move forward in. With the recommendations that you found in the study, was there any type of 1, 3, 5-year plan of how to roll out some of those recommendations, and any cost associated with those?
Yes, ma'am. So outside of the plan, in an Excel spreadsheet, we put the whole plan into an Excel spreadsheet. We call it the implementation matrix. And so we put every goal, every strategy and action into that spreadsheet. We gave it about a 5-year time period. And so we made our first cut at recommending about basically the timing for the implementation of those strategies, and then also any potential partners that our CDO can engage with to help implement that might be involved in implementation. So I will say that I really believe that strategic plans should not be static documents. I really believe they're evergreen documents, and that conditions will change. Who would have thought, if we finished a plan in 2019, that the following year there's going to be a global pandemic and everything, has to change. So every plan has to be able to be modified, to be adjusted as conditions change, as new opportunities change. And so, my hope is Jeff and Tiffany and the team, if they invite us back in 5 years to see how things have gone, that this plan looks quite a bit different. That implementation matrix looks quite a bit different than it does right now, in terms of both timing and in terms of the actual strategies themselves.
I have a quick question. You didn't say a whole lot about the current office makeup in terms of what specific additional resources we need. We have enough. Any recommendations about how to better structure the office, regardless of what organization you have as terms of leadership, whether it's private, public, or county, whatever. But what is it that we're missing that we need to be as effective as we can be?
Well, I think some additional staff would be helpful. Again, that project manager position, I think adding that to the team would make the whole team itself more effective. It's not that that we feel like this is an underfunded organization, but I do feel, Charleston County, they have about a 10-person staff doing economic development. In Greenville area, the Greenville Area Development Corporation, they have a 7-member team. So it's not about the amount of money, it's not about the sites, but it's about really the capability within the team. And then, if you were to add in some of that additional private sector resources that will give the organization some additional flexibility and speed and being able to do some things, I think that would make it more effective as well. I don't know, Jeff, did you want to say something in terms of the staffing?
Yeah, I think the most important things, we've come to the conclusion that we had research, there's already a lot of duplication there. That's something that we can outsource to our regional groups. I think it was county council that told us that we needed to communicate better. So that's the need for that marketing and communications slot. And we're in the infancy of trying to hire that position. And last, I would concur with the comments Alex made about the project manager. Right now, I'm working a lot of the projects, and it's basically I have to drop everything I'm doing and go work a project, and it just doesn't leave a lot of time. And the same's true with Miss Harrison. When Tiffany was working on the Mark Anthony project, that she basically dropped everything for 3 or 4 months, and nothing else happened while she was working on that. Those projects are just time intensive. So I think that's the points I would want to make.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. McBride?
Yes. In regards to the new independent public-private partnership, what happens to the existing economic development program that we have in-house? What would be that impact?
Well, the practical recommendation is that the organization would sort of reconstitute it as a 501c3 outside of the county, again, with those oversight controls that we recommended. So in essence, the department would be spun out and it would reside outside of county government. And I know that this is something that can take a while. This is not something that perhaps is feasible in the first quarter, or actually, I guess, in the second quarter of this year. It would take some time. I know that when we worked with Charleston County on that recommendation, which the county council was supportive of, they got the city attorney involved. There has to be some due diligence. You have to do articles of incorporation. You actually have to spend some time creating that 501c3, getting approval from the IRS. So it takes some time to do these kinds of things. The presentation I made to Dallas City Council about creating a new authority outside of the city of Dallas, if they started right now, probably the earliest they could be successful in doing that would be the second or third quarter of 2022.
Now, what county has been successful in doing this already?
There are some other counties in the, one of the things that we're seeing around the country is an increasing embrace of engaging the private sector in economic development. And so again, I really feel like, GADC is one example of a they are in essence the county arm, or the county's economic development arm. Charleston County has realized that they feel like they can be more successful doing this. There are cities and counties, around the country that have been doing this increasingly over the last few years. Actually, a few years ago, we worked with the state of Delaware about making a similar recommendation, and the state of Delaware they created a new statewide economic development organization that was a 50-50 match between the state of Delaware and the private sector in the state.
So there are counties that are considering it, but has not been fully implemented. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not sure which counties are considering it. I know Charleston County, this is in the works in Charleston County. They're still kind of putting some ducks in a row before they get final council approval, but they've done their due diligence on this as well.
The final question I have is regarding, we talked a little bit about the implementation plan, but is there, with the ones that you work with, the counties you work with, and on their implementation plan, do you also provide assistance or guidance in helping to implement the implementation plan, for lack of a better term? Yeah,
we do. Well, we pride ourselves on always making ourselves available to any of our clients after the engagement is completed. So, Jeff and Tiffany, they can always if they have a question about something, they can always pick up the phone and call us. It wasn't in this particular scope of work, but sometimes we'll do an implementation workshop with the community, and that's really just kind of sitting down with them and breaking out the strategies and identifying what's the low-hanging fruit, what can be accomplished in 30, 60, 90 days. And if Jeff and Tiffany wanted to have that conversation with us, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, and one more question. we have a number of groups working on economic development, as Mr. Rubel mentioned, as you probably are aware of it.
Yeah.
How do all those groups fit together with the new independent public-private partnership? Because it's just so many that are out there working.
Sure. Well, again, this isn't about competing with any group. This is not about competing for resources or creating a new group just to create a new group. This is really about making the RCEDO more effective as an organization. I still think that it'll be a relationship of collaboration with these other organizations in the region. It's not about taking away activities or duplicating activities. It's RCEDO still has to fit in with this regional ecosystem. And I know it's a lot of moving parts right now. There are some questions about how regional economic development is going to be done. We weren't asked to weigh in on that, but we were aware of that, and we really feel like even in that context, having a public-private partnership would still benefit Richland County's economic development efforts.
Okay, and lastly, I just want to thank you. Many of the issues you raised are issues that have been of major concern for me and others on the council, so thank you.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Ms. Barron?
I think that Ms. McBride addressed my questions. I was just a little concerned about the duplication of services and just the overall role or I guess the specific place that Richland County will play moving forward should we go with this model. And I think Alex has answered the question. I'm a little concerned about how this will be implemented and its impact. But I'm sure as we gather more information and we have an opportunity to kind of really just delve into the presentation, you will make that available to us. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I think actually Jeff has that, and he can share it with you, and as well as the strategic plan. I'd encourage you to look at the strategic plan. Within the document itself, we actually did a partner network analysis where we kind of all the different organizations that touch economic development in some form or fashion. We kind of put them in a matrix and all of the different activities that are associated with economic development to kind of show the reader and show the team who's doing what in economic development. So I think that will kind of provide you all some additional context for that regional environment.
Okay, great. It sounds like if implemented as described, it would be a great opportunity for growth for Richland County and those in the surrounding area who are in this type of industry and business, because I think it's high time for us to stop fighting, trying to get the same resources, but to do more together. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Agree completely. Thank you.
Any further questions? I certainly think this has been very informative and give us a lot to consider and work with as we move forward. Do we have anyone from Mr. Rubel or anyone else in administration would like to make any comments before we move on?
Mr. Chair, I just want to thank County Council for their participation today in this meeting. Thank you for your interest and support for economic development. This office is the result of County Council making bold moves and investing in itself. And I think it's paying dividends and will over the future. I know it can be a little disconcerting to see that idea of a public-private. And the first reaction, I think, is, well, we'd lose control. And I don't think that's the intent, and I don't think it would happen. I think Richland County Council would still retain control of a public-private. But again, thank you for all your support, and certainly we'll send both this presentation and we will resend the strategic plan out to the council. And certainly always feel free to call me if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. One last statement, Mr. Rubel. We need to, would you like staff introduce themselves so that all council members will know?
Sure. I think Ms. Harrison, you're on the line. Can you introduce yourself? You're
Can I get
muted.
myself off mute? Yes, I'm happy to do that. Hi, good evening, everyone. I am Tiffany Harrison, and I'm the Deputy Director. I have been here in the Richland County office since 2016. I have spent my entire career in economic development. I started at the State Department of Commerce. I was in Fairfield County as the director for about 10 years before joining Richland County. So nice to see everyone. Thank you.
And Kim?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kim Mann. I'm the manager of existing industry here at, and I manage the BRE program that he spoke about in the strategic plan. And I've been with the Economic Development Office and Richland County for about 4 years now.
Thank you, Kim. And last but not least, Mariah.
Good evening. I'm Mariah Washington, the administrative coordinator. I've been with the office since 2017.
Thank you, Mariah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I just want council members to know the people that are working and the people that give us all that reading we have to do for the council agenda. So, and thank you for your work.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, so I'll give you all a few minutes for your 6 o'clock meeting. I just want to thank everybody for your participation. And I'm going to ask Ms. Owens to please quickly call the roll for adjournment. So let me get a motion for adjournment. I apologize.
So moved.
Second.
Moved properly second. Ms. Owens, can you call the roll for the motion for adjournment?
Malinowski,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Joe Walker, Barron,
Yes.
Overture Walker,
Yes.
Mackey,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton. Motion passes.
Thank you. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you so very, very much. And my colleagues, I'll see y'all very shortly.